So, a lot of people kind of report that friendships don't really last anymore, or at least not the way they used to. You'll meet adults like in their 40s and 50s who talk about having the same friends since middle school and high school or even college. And I know, and I don't know, it just kind of feels like that kind of brotherhood just doesn't really exist anymore. Like, that just doesn't happen now. There seems to be like this trend where people get really close to one another and then out of nowhere the friendship just kind of decays. It feels like friendships are way more fickle in our current environment than they used to. And I think this mostly affects Gen Z, at least right now, because like I said, older generations seem to genuinely have friends they've kept since they were young and still talk to regularly. So I think, yeah, this is more of like a Gen Z problem as opposed to like, older generation problem, right? I get that older people have simply been alive for longer, so of course longer friendships are going to seem almost inherent to them because, well, they've just been alive or on this planet for a lot longer than like, say, Gen Z or even Gen Alpha, of course, right? But still, it really feels like friendships today tend to expire after maybe like 3 to 5 years. And it kind of lines up pretty well with like life stages, because like high school is about 4 years, college typically is 4 years. So friendships seem to cap out around the time of like that time frame, I think a big reason for this has to do with the pandemic. The pandemic took away crucial years from the people's youth. Years that were supposed to help teenagers and young adults kind of develop social skills. And there are some pretty clear psychological mechanisms at play here. In psychology, we talk about the mere exposure effect and also the proximity principle, right? This is like one of the more common psychological phenomena that just happens to people, and I'll quickly explain them. So yeah, very quickly, what are these? The mere exposure effect basically means that people tend to grow to like things simply because they see them more often, right? This could be like a commercial, an activity, or even a person, right? If you're constantly exposed to this item or this object or this person, you will subconsciously naturally just grow to like them more just because you see them every day. Even if you don't exchange words with that person, right? Over time, that person, I know I said like commercial or object, but let's stick to people. Over time, it becomes part of your routine seeing that person, right? Like, imagine you take the bus every day to go to work or school or whatever, and you see the same person every day taking the same bus as you are, right? You'll naturally grow to like them simply because you haven't had any negative situations with that person. Let's say you don't ever talk to them. You didn't have any negative situation with that person and you're constantly exposed to them. This tells the brain that that person is healthy to be around and maybe they're even worth like creating some level of friendship with that person. So you start feeling comfortable with them. Another mechanism that matters here is the proximity principle. Basically, in psychology, we feel stronger emotions and connection to things, specifically in this situation, people that are physically closer to us. So like in-person friendships tend to feel more meaningful than ones like Discord or like, online friendships, right? I think it's pretty clear why these two things matter when we talk about the pandemic. People were forced to see their friends less and interact online more. Because of the proximity principle, those friendships started to feel subconsciously less important, right? I know that kind of makes a lot of people uncomfortable because I think it is sort of like taboo or maybe unconventional to say that real life friendships tend to be more meaningful than online friendships. Of course, online friendships can be very meaningful, but I think that everyone who has like an online friendship, or not everyone, but like a good percentage of people would love to meet that person IRL. And do you know what the reason why for that? It's simply because IRL friendships do tend to be more meaningful. or at least in our minds, we take them more seriously when they're in person. So if, your friendships are, explicitly, or rather, more, they tend to be more online, that friendship tends to slowly decay.